Flash playing this time against Simic Ramp on Bertarioni's side. It is a matchup that Flash should have some edge in.
Right, and a lot of the time it's going to come down to play draw, and Rountree having the ability to actually just react to everything that Bertarioni wants to do is going to be a big deal for him.
It's early on, both players trading some growth spirals. Yeah, there are similar cards in both decks.
Ultimately, the Simic Ramp deck wants to resolve a bunch of big, expensive things, and that's not going to line up very well against your Frilled Mystic Quench deck.
And that's the first big play. We see Bertarioni going for a Risen Reef. It's a perfect card to hit with a Frilled Mystic on Collin's side.
Right, see, and the nice thing about Frilled Mystic is it's a piece of interaction and a threat that can get developed.
And we do feel like on this side, Jeremy trying to search for some lands. He goes for a Krasis for 1. Collin lets the trigger resolve, and then Frilled Mystic sit again. So attack in. Collin trying to make the game go quickly here as he attacks Jeremy down to 12.
Yeah, and this is the formula. This is how you win the game.
Cavalier of Thorns. Quad Frilled Mystic? No, just 2. But Sinister Sabotage will do some work. Now Jeremy down to 6. Nissa will say put Jeremy down to 3. And can...
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Recover from this. Can Jeremy do it? He's going to go for the 4 runners here, but that is not enough. Collin Rountree taking a quick game 1 over Jeremy Bertarioni.
Yeah, and that's exactly the formula you expect. Rountree had Ramp Spell into Frilled Mystic, into Counterspell Nissa, and that Bertarioni just didn't get to resolve a relevant spell that entire game.
And Collin Rountree showing off here with Simic Flash. The ability to be on the play, be up on mana. Cards like Frilled Mystic, I know you talked about, they are pretty swingy in whether they are good or bad.
Right, so a lot of times if you're at parity or ahead, the card is just so good at punishing what your opponent is doing. It's something that... It's clunky because it's expensive, but if you break it down, a lot of times it feels like blue for Counterspell, green for 3/2 with Flash. And if you get to do that, it feels like you're getting to develop your own board while keeping your opponent in the position they are in. So if you're ahead, that means keeping them behind and keeping basically your boot on their neck.
This time Jeremy will be on the play. He's going to try to get out ahead of Collin Rountree to stop things like Frilled Mystic from working as well as they do.
Right, this is the spot where Bertarioni really needs to prioritize just things that he can get onto the battlefield. Even something like Arboreal Grazer, even though it's kind of weak as a chump blocker, being able to just put lands onto the battlefield can end up being incredible for him here because it would allow him to do something like Double Spell. Things like Frilled Mystic are not mana efficient.
Right, the advantage Jeremy has is that he has more mana ramp in this matchup. He has 2 Grazers, 4 Leafkin Druids, 4 Growth Spirals, as compared to Collin, who has 2 Paradise Druids, 4 Growth Spirals, and that's it. So 10 to 6 and an advantage on ramp. Right. And then that's not even counting Risen Reef.
Exactly. And, Bertarioni, ultimately, if he can just resolve his big spells, will be in a good spot. His cards are more powerful pound for pound than Rountree's. The issue is getting them through counter magic.
So we see a turn 2 ramp. And this shows Collin really wanting to stay ahead. It's immediately the Petty Theft to bounce the Leafkin Druid back to Jeremy's hand. He knows it's going to get recast.
Love a good remand.
So it doesn't... Well, I guess it kind of draws a card because it's hanging out. You can cast it. The card it draws is a 3/1. Risen Reef. And this is, you see the mana advantage because when Collin went for the Aether Gust, Jeremy's at the ready with Mystical Dispute, and now he gets to start making card advantage with Risen Reef.
And these are the games that the ramp deck will win. You look at the permanent count on the battlefield. It's 6 to 4. Bertarioni has more things that he can do.
And you get into a spot where Bertarioni can cast something like Leafkin Druid, and suddenly... What does Collin do about this? It's another Risen Reef trigger. So it's a double or triple ramp spell, however you want to count it. But he certainly can't fight over it.
Right, and soon, when there are enough creatures in play, those are each worth 2 mana.
Right. Right, see Bertarioni certainly with 8 mana next turn, perhaps with 11 mana next turn. It's just a ton.
Right, like let's say a Cavalier of Thorns gets cast by Bertarioni.
Right.
Do you counter it? or run the risk of a Nissa resolving.
Yeah, and Collin, sensing that he can't control the game, I like this. He's behind. He just starts jamming spells. He goes for Nissa, who shakes the world, into a ton of open mana, saying, hey, maybe you don't have the counterspell. Maybe I can do this. Calls him on it, which I think is correct, but Jeremy does have.
Look, 50% chance he has it or he doesn't.
That's how it works. The coin just landed the wrong way. What can you do? Swinging in for 4 is Jeremy. Now the Leafkin Druids tap for so much more. This is for... with a Nissa, this is for a lot. He's going to draw 5 cards, I believe.
Oh,
only 4. Only 4. My mistake.
Wow.
But Collin's going to pick up the rest of the cards, and we do go to a game 3.
And those are the games that Bertarioni wins, right? He was able to get out ahead on the battlefield. He had a untimely Mystical Dispute to force a Risen Reef through, which just increased the power of the rest of his mana creatures. And then from there was able to force Rountree to start having to make these sort of gambit plays to come back from behind.
Yeah, and it's about mana, right? It's about him getting mana early, and the fact that Mystical Dispute costs 1 instead of 2 when in encounter war.
Oh, that's such a big deal. Rountree had a tap land on turn 3, and that was crucial. If that had been an untapped land, it could have completely changed the texture of that game.
And this is something I've liked in the Simic ramp build that Lotus Box is playing. Their sideboard is 4-4-4-3. It is 4 Mystical Disputes, 4 Aether Gusts, 3 Shifting Ceratops. That is a huge amount of sideboard for this matchup.
You'd love to see it. It's so many cards that are going to end up lining up just incredibly against blue cards, against green cards, and in Shifting Ceratops' case, against counter spells.
Right. The ramp deck so far has not put up a very good record at the Players' Championship here, but Jeremy hoping to make that work anyway. I believe right now he's the only player with a match win with Simic Ramp, but he's looking to make it too.
Right. He is the only player, I believe, still playing Simic Ramp at the... Oh, no, there's Drake Sasser as well.
Drake and Zan have buys and are playing the deck.
Okay.
But yeah, the player to actually have won a match with Ramp, it is 1 win and a stack of losses.
Hey, he's a win away from doubling that statistic.
And, post-board, I think it's pretty reasonable that he could do it here.
Oh, it's so much better post-board. So many of the cards in the main deck just are not worth cards.
The question is now going to be mana as we go to Game 3. Collin is on the play with Flash. Growth Spiral already at the ready for Rountree.
And that's just part of the formula for success here for Rountree.
And yeah, Paradise Druid. So when both players have 2 ramp spells, it's... That's going to be big.
Look at this. Bertarioni
misses.
didn't have one. So unless it's a Growth Spiral, he's not getting out ahead here.
No, he's going to have to play from behind on mana. Now the question is, what sort of follow-up exists? We see Nightpeck Ambush from Collin. Is this the Ambusher into Nissa Pinch? If it's there's just not much Collin can do about it. Jeremy, 3 mana play counters the Nightpeck Ambusher, but is Nissa the follow-up? Does Collin have the land and the Planeswalker? He does not. In fact, the follow-up is fairly beatable here. It's just going to be a 3/3. He draws a card that can be played around.
So if he's pinched on mana, the thought here is just that you need to apply pressure, and it's not getting better to tap out for this card.
Gadwick was a play, but Collin has the follow-up with Nissa, who shakes the world. Jeremy's hope was because he didn't get punished by Nissa that turn. Maybe Collin just didn't have one, but that's no longer the case. Collin does make Nissa, and now Jeremy down to 14.
And when Gadwick's on the battlefield, you can't just not commit anymore, right? You have to actually try to get closer to winning the game.
Can 2 Risen Reefs dig Jeremy out of it? Not if they both draw cards. He needs them to find lands, and because his mana advantage is snowballing out of control.
Right, it's very rare that not having things to do with your mana is the squeeze these ramp decks find themselves in. They just need to have something.
Aether Gust, Jeremy's trying, but he can't do it. Instead, Collin counters it with Mystical Dispute, taps the other blocker, makes another creature, swings in. It's for 9, maybe for 11. It's for 11. Jeremy's down to 3. And it's looking like our one. Collin Rountree is going to come off the bye in style, getting out ahead with a Nissa onto the table. Jeremy cannot keep pace. Risen Reefs are not able to get enough lands out. And facing down what's going to be 4 lethal attackers, there's just not a line for Jeremy.
Okay, this is a start. This Leafkin Druid can get him some resources to at least block.
He's going to have to block. It's so hard, right? He's going to have to block 4 creatures, and Gadwick is going to tap away the blockers.
Okay, so Hydroid Crisis is kind of 2 blockers.
Yes, it gets him the life point, and it's the blocker. But you see Collin now showing a Mystical Dispute on the Crisis, so takes care of the blocker, taps a blocker, and that's going to be game and match. It is Collin Rountree with the win.
Yeah, and this Simic ramp deck looking like it might not have been the best meta call coming into the field here.
All right, Collin. So Collin will advance where he will play the winner of Edgar Magalhaes and Drake Sasser for a place in our Sunday.